Welcome to our deep dive into the life of Clara. We're going to try to unpack her story, especially for all you millennials in the family who might only know bits and pieces of her life. Get ready for a journey, through World War II, life in a convent, and the bustling streets of post-war Hong Kong.
Yeah, it's amazing how her life, reflects some of the massive social and cultural changes that happened during her time. From surviving a world war to embracing new opportunities in Hong Kong, her story is full of twists and
So
turns.
let's rewind all the way back to Clara's childhood in Canton. Her dad was a master calligrapher, so skilled that people would travel for miles just to get his work. It makes you wonder, was calligraphy as prized back then as, say, coding is today?
Absolutely. Calligraphy was more than just pretty writing. It was an art form deeply embedded in Chinese culture. It's like how we see coding now, a highly valued skill that can open doors. But for Claire, it wasn't just her dad's profession. It was also her childhood punishment. Her dad would make her practice for hours. What might seem harsh to us now was probably seen as a valuable life lesson back then.
Right. It's funny how perspectives change, right? Can you imagine our parents making us write code for hours as punishment? But speaking of change, things took a dramatic turn when the Japanese invasion of China reached Canton in 1941. Clara's peaceful childhood was suddenly shattered. For a 9-year-old, that must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. War forces people to adapt and become resourceful. And, we see that in Clara's story. Imagine having to flee your home, living with constant air raid sirens and blackouts. This generation had to grow up fast.
There's this really poignant story about their time on a duck farm while they were fleeing. Clara helped raise these 12 ducks only to realize later that they were going to be eaten. It's a stark reminder of how war impacts every aspect of life, even something as simple as raising ducks.
Exactly. It teaches you about scarcity survival and the harsh realities of war. And yet, even amidst this chaos, Clara's personality shines through. She was known for her speed and fearlessness, even outrunning dogs and neighborhood boys. I guess that adventurous spirit helped her navigate those turbulent times.
It makes you realize that even in the darkest of times, people find ways to be resilient. Speaking of resilience, the story of Clara's family, the Lungs, is a prime example of that. Their journey is like a roller coaster, from building a successful business to losing everything and starting over in Hong Kong.
The Loom story really captures the entrepreneurial spirit of the time. Ching's grandfather started as a laborer, but his wife Clara's grandmother had a vision. She pushed the family to buy the factory, even borrowing money to make it happen.
Wow, she sounds like a real go-getter. What made her so confident in the iron factory business?
Well, their timing was impeccable. China was shifting from metal currency to paper money, and suddenly everyone needed safes to store their newfound wealth. The Loongs seized this opportunity, and they became known for their high-quality safes. There's even a newspaper headline from that time: "A safe isn't safe unless it's a Loom safe." They became a household name.
Wow, talk about a marketing win. But even with this success, tragedy struck when Clara's father was kidnapped and murdered. It's hard to fathom the pain the family must have endured.
This event highlights the vulnerability that even successful families faced in those times. It's a stark reminder of the lawlessness and instability that plagued China during that period. Despite this tragedy, the family led by Clara's oldest brother managed to keep the business going.
It shows incredible resilience,
Yeah,
especially considering their oldest brother was still in school. It's like their whole world was turned upside down. But they found a way to keep going. And then, as if things weren't difficult enough, the rise of communism in China forced them to flee to Hong Kong, leaving behind everything they had built.
it's a story of loss, but also of adaptation. They were forced to start from scratch in a new world, a testament to their ability to embrace change and rebuild their lives.
So they rise in Hong Kong, a place buzzing with energy. Very different from Canton. I'm curious, what was the cultural scene like in Hong Kong at that time?
Post-war Hong Kong was a melting pot of cultures. You had the British influence, the influx of refugees from mainland China, and this incredible energy of rebuilding and reinvention. It was a dynamic and sometimes chaotic place, full of opportunity but also challenges.
For a young Clara, navigating this new world must have been a whirlwind, especially starting at Maryknoll Convent School, a Catholic school run by, from what I hear, very strict nuns.
Maryknoll Convent School was a prestigious institution known for its rigorous academics and emphasis on discipline. For many Chinese families who had fled communism, it represented a chance for their children to receive a quality education in a safe and structured environment. But for Clara, it was more than just school. It was where her journey of faith began.
She was so drawn to Catholicism that she kept asking to be baptized. It's interesting how she embraced a faith so different from her family's background.
It speaks to her independent spirit. her willingness to explore new ideas and beliefs. And her commitment wasn't just personal. She joined the Legion of Mary, a lay Catholic organization focused on service and evangelization. She even started teaching Catholicism to a local family, the Lees, who, believe it or not, had these massive
These
bulldogs.
giant bulldogs and religious lessons, that's quite the image.
It definitely paints a vivid picture of the contrasts in her life at that time. But it also highlights her dedication. She became the Lee's children's godmother at just 15 years old.
That's a huge responsibility for someone so young. It seems like she was already showing signs of leadership and a desire to make a difference. But Hong Kong wasn't all about school and faith. There's this story about Clara working on a census, going door to door in those tall, thin buildings.
Those buildings were notorious for swaying, especially during typhoons. Imagine the courage it took for a young girl to climb those stairs, facing her fears head-on to complete her task.
It's like a scene out of a movie, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the leper colony visit. It must have been a reality check for her, seeing the harsh conditions these people lived in.
It was a turning point. She went with Sister Damien, a nun known for her work with lepers. But for Clara, it was too much. She realized she wasn't emotionally prepared for that level of suffering.
It's a moment of self-awareness, sometimes even with the best intentions we have to recognize our limitations. But it's clear that her desire to help others was a driving force in her life.
And that desire led her to make a life-altering decision, to pursue a calling to religious life in Ireland.
Ireland. That's a huge leap, literally and figuratively.
So we left off with Clara, making this big decision to travel to Ireland and join a convent. Imagine a young woman from Hong Kong venturing halfway across the world in the 1950s. It was a bold move driven by this deep sense of faith.
It really is like something out of a movie, right? Trading the bustling streets of Hong Kong for the rolling green hills of Ireland. What was it like for her when she arrived?
Well, she traveled by ship. A journey that took over a month. Can you imagine the anticipation? This mix of excitement and nerves. And then she arrives in Ireland and the reality hits. The weather.
Ah, yes, the infamous Irish weather. I bet that was a bit of a shock compared to the warmth of Hong Kong.
Definitely. The cold, the dampness. It took some getting used to. But Clara was determined to embrace this new chapter. She threw herself into the convent routine, finding comfort in that discipline and structure of religious life.
It's fascinating how she found solace in a lifestyle that's so different from what most millennials would even consider today. What was it about convent life that appealed to her, do you think?
Well, remember, this was a time when religious life was seen as a highly respected path, especially for women. It offered a sense of purpose, community, and a chance to really dedicate yourself to something larger than yourself. And for Clara, who had experienced so much upheaval and change, the convent offered this sense of stability and order.
Right, it makes you realize how much societal values have shifted,
Yeah.
right? But even within this structured environment, it seems like Clara wasn't just passively following the rules. She was actively seeking knowledge and understanding.
Absolutely. She really immersed herself in religious studies, learning about theology, philosophy, history. It was like a whole new world of intellectual exploration was opening up to her. And amidst this, she found a real sense of camaraderie with the other novices, young women from all over the world who had also chosen this path.
It's amazing to think of this diverse group of women brought together by their shared faith. Did they form strong bonds despite their different backgrounds?
Oh, definitely. They shared their stories, hopes, and fears, and formed these friendships that transcended cultural boundaries. It was a real sisterhood, united by their commitment to a life of service. But as we know, things didn't quite go as planned for Clara in Ireland.
Yeah, there's a sense of mystery surrounding her time at the convent. What actually happened that led to her leaving?
Well, at first, everything seemed to be going well. Clara was excelling in her studies, enjoying the company of the other novices, and, finding fulfillment in her daily routines. But gradually, she started sensing that something was off.
Off? Like what kind of off? Was there something specific that happened?
It was more of a feeling, a shift in the atmosphere. She noticed these hushed conversations, strange glances, almost like she was being watched. And then one day she was summoned by Mother Mary Peter, the head of the convent.
Oh, that sounds ominous. What happened during that meeting?
It was during this meeting that Mother Mary Peter delivered the devastating news. Clara was not deemed a suitable fit for religious life and was asked to leave the convent. Imagine the shock, the heartbreak. It was like having a rug pulled out from under you.
It's hard to imagine what that must have felt like, to have dedicated yourself to this path only to be told you're not welcome. What was the reason they gave her?
Unfortunately, the sources don't provide a clear explanation for their decision. It's left somewhat ambiguous, adding to the mystery. Perhaps they felt her personality was too independent, or maybe they had concerns about her ability to fully conform to the strict demands of convent life.
Right. It's interesting to think about how those standards might have differed from what we consider normal today. But regardless of the reason, it must have been incredibly difficult for Clara to accept this rejection.
Absolutely. She pleaded with them, tried to understand why, but the decision was final. She had to leave the community she had grown to love, the life she had envisioned for herself. It was a time of profound disappointment and uncertainty.
So what happened next? Did she return to Hong Kong immediately?
Well, her journey back wasn't without its own set of challenges. While in London waiting for her connecting flight, she realized she was missing some crucial paperwork. Her cholera vaccination certificate.
Oh no, that's a travel nightmare. What did she do?
Stranded in a foreign city with no place to go, she was fortunate to encounter some kind Columban fathers who offered her shelter and helped her sort out the paperwork. It's a reminder that even in the midst of difficult circumstances, acts of kindness can make a world of difference.
It's like a little ray of light in an otherwise difficult situation. So after this unexpected detour, she finally makes it back to Hong Kong, but to a life that's now drastically different from what she had planned.
Imagine the mix of emotions she must have felt, the disappointment of her shattered dream, the uncertainty of what lay ahead, and perhaps even a sense of relief to be back in a familiar environment.
It's a pivotal moment in her story,
Yeah.
a crossroads where she has to decide what her next chapter will be. We left off with Clara returning to Hong Kong after her convent life. It must have been a strange mix of emotions, coming home, but not to the life she had planned for.
Right. Imagine having this vision for your life and then having to completely shift gears. There's a sense of loss, but also a chance for reinvention. And, that's what we see in Claire's next chapter.
So what were her first steps back in Hong Kong? Did she jump right back into the world of faith?
Actually, she focused on practical matters first. She needed a job, and, her wardrobe needed a bit of an update, especially after years of wearing a habit. Think about it going from the simple uniform life to the fashion-conscious world of Hong Kong in the 1950s. Must have been a big adjustment.
I can only imagine. Did she struggle to find work after being away for so long?
Not at all. She landed a job at Unima, a French oil company. It was a fast-paced, demanding environment, a far cry from the quiet contemplation of the convent. But Clara thrived in this new setting.
It's interesting how skills from a seemingly unrelated experience can be so transferable. What do you think she learned in the convent that helped her succeed in the corporate world?
Discipline, organization, and a strong work ethic. These qualities honed during her time in the convent proved to be valuable assets in the corporate world. And let's not forget her language skills. Her English refined during her time at Maryknoll and in Ireland would have given her an edge in Hong Kong's international business scene.
So it's like all her experiences, even the unexpected ones, were all pieces of a puzzle that came together to shape her path. But even with her career success, I wonder, did she ever feel conflicted about leaving the convent? Did she ever question her faith?
It's natural to have doubts, especially after such a life-altering experience. She probably grappled with questions about God's plan for her life, whether she had made the right choices, but she didn't let those doubts consume her.
So how did she reconcile her faith with her new life?
She found a way to integrate her faith into her daily life. She reconnected with the Maryknoll Alumni Association, becoming actively involved in organizing events and fundraising. It was a way for her to give back to her community and stay connected to her Catholic roots.
A beautiful example of how faith can manifest in different ways, outside of traditional institutions. But let's not forget, this was the 1950s, and societal expectations for women were very different back then. Was there pressure on Clara to get married and settle down?
Absolutely. Her family, especially her Aunt Yipo, was eager to see her married. They started arranging dates, introducing her to eligible bachelors. There's even this funny story about a charming French vice-consul who was smitten with her.
It sounds like something out of a Jane Austen novel. What happened with the French vice-consul? Did it work out?
Not quite. Claire wasn't looking to just settle down with anyone who met her family's approval. She was looking for a genuine connection, someone who shared her values and understood her journey.
It shows a strong sense of self-awareness. She wasn't going to compromise her happiness just to fit societal expectations. And speaking of connections, that brings us to the story of how she met Ching, her future husband.
Well, their meeting was anything but romantic. It was an arranged dim sum lunch with family members present. Not exactly the ideal setting for sparks to fly.
It sounds more like a business meeting than a first date. What made them stand out to each other in such a formal setting?
It was Qing's honesty that caught Clara's attention. He was upfront about a recent job rejection. From Alkin, the very company Clara worked for, it was a refreshing change from the usual attempts to impress.
That's interesting. It wasn't some grand gesture or flashy display that drew them together,
Yeah.
but a moment of genuine vulnerability.
Exactly. And that authenticity continued in their subsequent interactions. Qing was persistent, but in a respectful way. He would call Clara directly, even telling her, "I'll see you next Saturday," leaving no room for ambiguity. It was bold, but also endearing in its straightforwardness.
So it's like he saw something special in her and wasn't afraid to pursue it. Did Clara respond well to this direct approach?
She was initially taken aback by his boldness, but she agreed to see him again. They started going on simple dates, dinners, walks, drives to the countryside. It was during one of these drives that Clara saw another side of Qing.
What happened during the drive?
Clara was hesitant to let Qing drive her beloved Buick, but he eventually convinced her. And during the drive, he told her about a serious car accident he had been in while in Europe. But he recounted the story with such calmness and composure that it really impressed Clara.
It's like he was showing her through his actions and his demeanor that he was someone she could rely on, someone who could handle life's ups and downs with grace.
You hit the nail on the head. Their relationship wasn't about grand romantic gestures or whirlwind romances. It was about this steady buildup of trust, respect, and shared experiences.
And as they spent more time together, Clara started to realize that she genuinely enjoyed his company. Even her mother noticed the change, teasingly pointing out that she must really like him. It's a fleet detail that highlights the importance of family in their lives.
It's a reminder that even though times have changed, some things remain constant. The importance of family, the support of loved ones, and the way those closest to us can see things we might not see ourselves.
So after all the twists and turns, the convent, the corporate world, the arranged dates, Clara found love in this quiet, unexpected way. It's a beautiful reminder that sometimes the most fulfilling relationships are the ones that blossom slowly and organically.
Clara's story is a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of adapting to change, and the unexpected ways in which we find love and purpose in life. It's a journey that spans continents, cultures, and generations, reminding us that even in a world that's constantly evolving, some things remain timeless. The value of family, the importance of faith, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive into the life of Clara. We learned so much not just about her experiences, but also about the historical and cultural context that shaped her generation. And for all of you millennials listening, I hope you gained a new appreciation for the fascinating lives of those who came before you. You know, their stories are a part of your story too. And who knows, maybe someday your lives will be the subject of a deep dive, inspiring future generations with your own unique adventures. Thanks for joining us. Been on Trainers.